I was walking to work when I noticed a homeless man on the sidewalk. Then he looked up, and I realized he was my ex. What he told me next made me cry right there in the street. Before I start, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a comment below. I hadn't thought about my ex in years. Not really. Sure, his name floated through my mind once in a while, usually late at night, when insomnia dug up old memories I didn't ask for, but I never let myself linger there. I told myself that chapter was closed, sealed, and shelved like an old book I'd already read too many times. That morning, I was just another woman rushing through downtown Chicago, balancing a coffee in one hand and my phone in the other, mentally rehearsing a presentation I had to give at work. The wind cut through my coat, sharp and unforgiving, the kind that reminds you winter doesn't care how put together you think you are. I was focused on surviving the day, not the past. I remember checking the time and thinking, if I miss this train, I'm screwed. That's when I saw him. Or at least, that's when I noticed the man I almost walked past. He was sitting against the brick wall of a closed grocery store, wrapped in a thin, dirty blanket that looked like it had lost the fight against the cold a long time ago. His shoes were mismatched. His beard was wild and gray in places that made him look older than he should have been. A cardboard sign rested against his knee, the words barely readable. Anything helps. God bless. I've lived in the city long enough to know how easy it is to look away. You train yourself to. If you don't, the weight of it all, the need, the suffering, the quiet desperation, can crush you. So I almost did what I always do. I looked straight ahead, but then he shifted. He adjusted the blanket. And when he did, his face tilted just enough for the morning light to hit it. And something inside me stopped. Not my feet, not my breath, my heart. Because I knew that face. Even under the dirt, even under the years, even under the way life had clearly beaten him down. I knew him. My stomach dropped so fast, it felt like I'd missed a step on a staircase. No, I whispered under my breath, barely aware I'd spoken. The man looked up. Our eyes met. And in that moment, the city disappeared. No traffic, no wind, no noise. Just us. He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. His eyes, those same eyes I used to wake up next to, the same ones that once looked at me like I was his whole world, filled with something that looked like shock and shame. He knew me too. I took a step back without meaning to, my heel catching on a crack in the sidewalk. My coffee sloshed dangerously close to spilling, but I didn't care. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. The man sitting on the freezing concrete, holding a cardboard sign, was my ex-husband. The man who once wore tailored suits. The man who used to complain if his steak wasn't cooked just right. The man who swore he'd always take care of me. I hadn't seen him since the divorce, since the screaming matches, since the accusations, since the night I packed a suitcase and walked out, telling myself I was choosing survival over love. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Like he didn't know what words he was allowed to use anymore. "Hey," he finally said, just one word, but it hit me harder than a full sentence. I should have walked away. That would have been the smart thing to do. Instead, I stood there, frozen, staring at the wreckage of a man I once thought I'd grow old with. What happened to you?" I asked before I could stop myself. The question came out softer than I expected. Not angry, not accusing, just stunned. He let out a breath that fogged in the cold air and gave a bitter half-smile. That's a long story. I glanced at my phone again. I was already going to be late. But suddenly, nothing else felt urgent. Are you really living out here?" I asked. He nodded once, slowly, Like admitting it out loud made it more real. Been a while. A while. I felt something crack inside my chest. This wasn't the revenge fantasy people imagine when they think about running into an ex who hurt them. This wasn't karma dressed up in a neat little bow. This was raw. This was ugly. This was heartbreaking. "I didn't recognize you at first," he said quietly. "You look good." I didn't know how to respond to that. I was doing better now. I had a steady job, a clean apartment, friends who cared about me, a life that made sense. And there he was, everything I used to know about him stripped away. "I thought you moved," I said, "after the divorce." "I tried," he replied. "Things didn't go the way I planned." That sentence felt heavier than it should have. I hesitated, then crouched down in front of him, ignoring the cold seeping through my pants. People walked past us, pretending not to stare, pretending not to listen. "Why didn't you ever reach out?" I asked. He looked down at his hands. They were rough, cracked, nothing like the ones that used to brush my hair back from my face. "I didn't think I deserved to," he said. Something in his voice told me there was more. A lot more. And for the first time since I saw him, I realized this wasn't just a chance encounter. This was the beginning of a truth I had never been told. I don't know how long we sat there in silence. The cold crept into my knees, my fingers went numb, and the city kept moving around us like nothing monumental was happening. People laughed, cars honked, someone cursed at a bus that splashed through a puddle. Meanwhile, my past was sitting 5 feet in front of me, wrapped in a blanket that barely counted as protection. "You don't have to talk about it," I said finally, though my voice betrayed me. I wanted him to talk. I needed him to. He shook his head slowly. "No, I think I do." He leaned back against the wall and stared up at the gray sky, like the answers were written somewhere above the buildings. "After you left, I told everyone I was fine," he began, "same way you probably did." I swallowed hard. He wasn't wrong. "At first, I really thought I'd bounce back," he continued. "I had savings, I had connections, I had my pride." He let out a humorless laugh. "Turns out pride's the first thing that gets you in trouble." I remembered the man he used to be, confident, stubborn, allergic to asking for help, the kind of guy who believed needing someone was a weakness. "What happened?" I asked. He glanced at me, then away again. "I lost my job 3 months after the divorce." That surprised me. Back then, he'd told me everything was going great, that his career was taking off, that I was the one who gave up too early. "I thought you were promoted," I said. "I told you that because I didn't want you to think leaving me was the right choice." He admitted quietly. Truth was, the company downsized. I was already on thin ice. Missed deadlines, missed meetings. "Because of the divorce?" I asked. He nodded once. "Because I didn't know how to live without you." That sentence landed somewhere deep and painful. "I spiraled," he went on. "I told myself I'd find something else fast, but weeks turned into months. My savings dried up faster than I expected." I could picture it now, him alone in the apart, boxes still half unpacked, silence where our arguments used to be. "I started using credit cards just to keep up appearances," he said. "Rent, food, drinks with people I didn't even like, just so I wouldn't feel invisible." "Why didn't you call me?" I asked again, softer this time. He finally looked straight at me. His eyes were red, not from the cold. "Because you looked free," he said, "and I didn't want to be the man who dragged you back into the mess." I felt my throat tighten. He continued. "Eventually, I couldn't keep the apartment. Moved into a smaller place, then a cheaper one, then a friend's couch." I waited, bracing myself. "Friends stop answering calls when you owe them money," he added. "Did you know that?" I nodded. I did. "One night I slept in my car," he said. "Just one night," I told myself. But the car got repossessed 2 weeks later. I sucked in a sharp breath. "God, that's when it really started," he said. Shelters, lines, waiting rooms that smell like bleach and despair. Being treated like you're already dead. I looked at the sign beside him again. Anything helps. How long have you been out here? I asked. He hesitated. Almost a year. A year. I stood up suddenly, pacing a few steps away, then back again. My chest felt too tight, like there wasn't enough air in the city. I hated you for so long, I admitted. You know that? He nodded. I know. I thought you ruined our marriage because you didn't care, because you were selfish, because you chose yourself over us. He flinched at that. I did choose something over us, he said, but it wasn't myself. My heart skipped. What do you mean? He looked down at his hands again, rubbing his thumb against a scar I remembered noticing years ago, but never asking about. There's something I never told you, he said. Something I should have. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the weather. What? I asked. He took a shaky breath. The night you walked out, that wasn't the worst day of my life. I stared at him. Then what was? He met my eyes, and for the first time since we'd reunited, I saw fear there. The day before, he said, when I found out what was really happening to me. My pulse hammered in my ears. Happening to you how? I asked. He swallowed hard. I was sick, really sick. The world seemed to tilt. Sick? I repeated. What are you talking about? He closed his eyes, like saying it out loud would make it real all over again. I got a diagnosis, he said. One that changed everything. I felt tears sting my eyes before I even knew why. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. He opened his eyes again, and his voice broke. Because I thought losing you was already enough pain for one lifetime. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The city noise rushed back in. Sirens in the distance, the rumble of a passing train, footsteps echoing on concrete. But it all felt far away. My mind was stuck on one word. Diagnosis. I knelt back down in front of him, my coat brushing the dirty sidewalk, and looked at his face again. I wasn't seeing the homeless man now. I was seeing my husband as he'd been in the last year of our marriage. Distant, irritable, exhausted. Pulling away no matter how hard I tried to reach him. All the pieces I never understood were suddenly scattered in front of me, begging to be put together. What kind of diagnosis? I asked. He hesitated, then exhaled slowly. The kind that makes you feel like the clock just got louder. My chest tightened. Stop talking in riddles. He gave a faint, sad smile. You always hated that. Yes, I said. So tell me. He rubbed his face, dragging his hands down over his beard. Like he was bracing himself. I was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's. The words hit me like a physical blow. No, I said immediately. That can't be right. You're too young. I was 42, he said quietly. It happens. I shook my head, struggling to process it. Parkinson's, a disease I associated with shaking hands and elderly relatives. Not the man who used to run 5 miles before work. Not the man who couldn't sit still through a movie. I noticed things for months before the diagnosis. He continued. My hand would tremble when I was stressed. My balance felt off. I was tired all the time. I remembered the coffee mugs he dropped, the way he snapped when I asked if he was okay. I thought you were just angry at me, I whispered. I was angry, he admitted, but not at you, at my body, at my future. He stared at the ground. The neurologist explained everything: medication, progression, the uncertainty. I heard maybe half of it. The rest just sounded like static. I felt my E. Why didn't you tell me? I asked again, my voice breaking this time. He finally looked at me, really looked at me. Because you were already carrying so much. I frowned. Carrying what? Your mom, he said. Your job. The pressure to be perfect. He swallowed. I didn't want to be another burden. I felt sick. I'd been so wrapped up in my own stress back then, so convinced he was emotionally abandoning me, that I never once considered he might be fighting something invisible. "I thought if I told you," he went on, "you'd stay out of pity, or you'd leave faster." "That's not fair," I said. "I know," he replied softly, "but fear doesn't play fair." He leaned his head back against the wall, eyes closed. "I convinced myself I could handle it alone, that if I worked harder, ignored the symptoms, I could outrun it. And instead, you pushed me away," I said. "Yes," he whispered. "I became someone I didn't recognize. I remembered the man who came home late, who flinched when I touched him, who snapped over nothing and apologized too late. I thought you stopped loving me," I said. "I loved you so much it terrified me," he replied. "I didn't want you to watch me fall apart." Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. I brushed them away angrily, embarrassed to be crying on a sidewalk in front of strangers. "So you just let me think you didn't care?" I asked. "I thought hating me would make it easier for you to leave," he said, "and maybe it did." I couldn't argue with that. "What happened after the diagnosis?" I asked, needing to understand the timeline, the choices. "At first, I followed the treatment plan," he said. "Medication helped some, but it messed with my sleep, my mood. I was late to work more, less focused." He laughed bitterly. "Corporate America doesn't care why you're slipping, just that you are." I clenched my fists. "I hid it from everyone," he continued. "My boss, my friends, you. I told myself I'd tell you when things stabilized." "But they didn't," I said. "No," he agreed. "They got worse." He paused, then added, "The day before you left, I found out my health insurance was about to change. Higher deductibles, fewer specialists." I panicked. That night flashed back to me. The fight, the shouting, the slammed door. "I came home angry and scared," he said, "and I took it out on you." I closed my eyes. "You accused me of being selfish." "I was projecting," he admitted. "I felt like my body had betrayed me, and I needed someone to blame." My heart ached with a mix of sorrow and anger. "You should have trusted me," I said quietly. "I know," he said. "Every day, I know." I sat there, letting the truth settle over me like a heavy blanket. "So after I left," I said slowly, "you were sick, unemployed, and alone." "Yes." "And you never once thought to tell me the truth?" He shook his head. "I thought you deserved a clean break, not a lifetime of worrying if today was the day I'd decline." I stared at him, overwhelmed by the weight of everything unsaid. All those nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering how love could disappear so suddenly. It hadn't disappeared at all. It had been buried under fear. I wiped my face and took a shaky breath. "What stage are you in now?" I asked. He hesitated. "Hard to say. I haven't seen a doctor in months." My heart dropped. "Why not?" He gave a sad smile. "Hard to prioritize healthcare when you're just trying to survive." I looked at him sitting there, fragile and proud and broken all at once. And that's when I realized something terrifying. This story wasn't just about what happened in the past. It was about what I was going to do next. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from the cold and from everything settling inside my chest. Helping him would change things. Walking away would haunt me. I stared down at him, this man who used to argue with me over paint colors and grocery lists, now worrying about where his next meal would come from. My instincts screamed in two directions at once. "This is not your responsibility anymore. How can you leave him like this?" "I can't just pretend I didn't see you," I said finally. He nodded, like he'd expected that answer. "I wouldn't ask you to." "That doesn't mean I can walk away either," I added. He looked up at me, eyes wary. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," I said, and I meant it. "But I owe myself the ability to sleep at night." I reached into my purse and pulled out my wallet, sliding a few bills into his hand. He tried to protest, but I closed his fingers gently around the money. "This isn't charity," I said. "It's a pause, just something to get you through." He swallowed hard. "Thank you." The word sounded heavier than it should have. I glanced at my phone again. I was officially late. Emails would be piling up. My boss would notice. But I couldn't make myself care. "Where do you usually sleep?" I asked. He hesitated. "There's a shelter on the south side, if there's space." "If," I repeated. "Yeah." I exhaled slowly. "That's not good enough." He frowned. "What are you thinking?" I didn't answer right away, because saying it out loud made it real. "I have a couch," I said, "just for a night." His eyes widened. "No, I can't." "I said a night," I interrupted. "One night. So you can shower, eat something hot, sleep somewhere safe." He shook his head, shame flooding his face. "You don't understand what you're asking." "I do," I said quietly. "And I'm still offering." He looked away. "You rebuilt your life. I don't want to mess that up." "You're not that powerful," I replied, a weak attempt at humor. For a moment, I thought he might refuse. Then his shoulders slumped. "One night," he said. "That's it." "Okay," I said. "One night." We rode the train in silence. People stared, some with curiosity, some with judgment. I felt protective in a way that surprised me, and angry at myself for feeling it. At my apartment, I handed him a towel and pointed to the bathroom. "Take your time," I said. "I'll order food." When he emerged, clean and wearing one of my old hoodies, I almost didn't recognize him. Not because he looked better, but because I remembered him. We ate quietly, the clink of forks the only sound between us. "I should go in the morning," he said eventually. "We'll talk then," I replied. That night, lying in my bed, I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. Letting him in had reopened wounds I thought were scars. But as much as I wanted to protect the life I'd built, I couldn't ignore the truth. Some stories don't end when you walk away. They wait. And I had a feeling this one was far from over. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed the image of him sitting on the sidewalk, the cardboard sign, the hollow look in his eyes, the quiet dignity he tried so hard to protect. I kept wondering if I'd crossed a line by bringing him into my home, or if I would have crossed a bigger one by leaving him out there. At some point before dawn, I heard movement in the living room. I froze. Then came the soft clink of a mug against the counter. I got out of bed slowly, my heart pounding harder than it had any right to, and peeked down the hallway. He was standing at the kitchen sink, staring out the window, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee like it was something sacred. "I hope that's okay," he said without turning around. "I remembered how you take it. Cream, no." That memory alone hit me harder than any apology ever could. "It's fine," I said, stepping closer. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he replied. The early morning light made him look softer, more fragile. The tremor in his right hand was subtle, but now that I knew to look for it, I couldn't unsee it. "How did you sleep?" I asked. He shrugged. "Best night I've had in months." That hurt more than it should have. We sat at the small kitchen table, steam rising from our mugs. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was heavy, full of things we were both afraid to say. "I should head out soon," he said eventually, "before you leave for work." I looked at him. "You don't have anywhere to go." "I always have somewhere," he replied gently. "It's just not somewhere you'd want to know about." That was when I realized something uncomfortable. Helping him for one night hadn't solved anything. It had only made the reality clearer. "I took the day off," I said suddenly. He looked up, startled. "Why?" "Because pretending everything is normal today would be a lie," I said, "and I'm done lying." He studied my face, like he was trying to figure out if this was real or something he might wake up from. "I don't want you to feel responsible for me," he said. I don't, I replied. I feel human. He exhaled slowly. After breakfast, he asked to shower again. When he came out, dressed neatly, hair combed, beard trimmed with an old razor I found in the back of the cabinet, he looked almost like himself. Almost. We sat back down, and I pulled out my laptop. What are you doing? He asked. Looking up clinics, I said. Free ones, sliding scale, anything. He stiffened. I didn't ask for that. I know, I said. I'm offering. You don't understand, he said quietly. Once you start helping, it doesn't stop. I don't want to be another weight around your neck. I closed the laptop and met his eyes. You're not a weight. You're a person who got sick in a system that punishes people for it. He looked away, jaw tightening. There's something else, he said suddenly. The way he said it made my stomach drop. What? I asked. I didn't just lose my job because of my performance, he admitted. I lost it because I ran out of medication. I felt a chill. What do you mean? After the divorce, my insurance coverage lapsed for a bit. I couldn't afford the prescription out of pocket. I tried to ration it. Oh my God, I whispered. When I missed doses, the symptoms got worse, he said. Shaking, slowness, brain fog. That's when my boss really noticed. And instead of helping, they documented, he finished. Then they let me go. I pressed my hand to my mouth. I tried to get back on track, he continued. But by the time I did, the damage was done. That's not failure, I said fiercely. That's the system failing you. He smiled sadly. Doesn't feel that way when you're the one falling. He hesitated, then added, there's more. My chest tightened again. Okay, I've been denied disability benefits twice, he said. Paperwork, missed deadlines, appeals I didn't understand. That's insane, I said. It's America, he replied quietly. That sentence stayed with me. I stood up and paced the kitchen. You can't go back out there, I said. Not like this. I don't have a choice, he replied. I stopped pacing and faced him. You do now. His eyes filled instantly. Please don't say that unless you mean it. I mean that we figure out next steps, I clarified. Together, not forever, just responsibly. What if I get worse? He asked. What if you watch me decline and regret this? I already regret not knowing sooner, I said. I can live with that. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. I never wanted you to see me like this. I never wanted you to suffer alone, I replied. We sat there, both emotionally exhausted. Then he reached into his backpack, the one battered thing he still owned, and pulled out a folded envelope. I was going to throw this away, he said, but maybe you should read it. What is it? I asked. A letter, he replied. I wrote it the night I slept in my car for the first time. I unfolded it carefully. My name was written at the top. I couldn't read past the first line without crying. It was an apology, a confession, a goodbye he never sent because he didn't want to trap me in guilt. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking. You loved me, even when you were losing everything, I said. I never stopped, he replied. That was the moment I understood the real truth. Our marriage hadn't ended because love died. It ended because fear spoke louder than honesty. And now, standing in my kitchen, holding a letter that felt like a time capsule of pain, I realized something. Helping him wasn't about going backward. It was about deciding what kind of person I wanted to be going forward. But I still didn't know how far that choice would take me. The first person who noticed something was off was my boss. I joined the Monday morning Zoom meeting 5 minutes late. Hair still damp from a rushed shower, heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. I tried to focus on quarterly numbers and deadlines, but my mind kept drifting back to my apartment, to the man sitting on my couch, quietly folding the blanket he'd slept under, like a guest who didn't want to leave fingerprints behind. Everything okay? My boss asked near the end of the call. Yeah, I said too quickly. Just A rough morning. He nodded, but his eyes lingered a second longer than usual. That was the first crack. By Wednesday, I'd missed 2 lunches with coworkers. By Friday, I'd turned down drinks with friends. Every excuse I gave was technically true. I was busy, tired, overwhelmed, but none of them explained the real reason. I was living 2 lives. In one, I was the capable woman who had rebuilt herself after divorce, the one people admired for being strong, independent, over it. In the other, I was helping my ex-husband navigate food pantries, free clinics, and disability paperwork. While trying not to reopen wounds I'd spent years stitching closed, he tried to stay invisible. He cleaned the apartment when he thought I wasn't looking. He washed dishes by hand even though I had a dishwasher. He waited to eat until I did, like he didn't trust the food to be real unless I was there. "You don't have to do all this," I told him one evening. "I know," he said. "That's why I do it." The first real conflict came when my friend Rachel stopped by unexpectedly. I'd forgotten she had a spare key. The door opened, laughter spilling in, then stopping abruptly. I walked out of the bedroom just in time to see her staring at him, "Oh," she said slowly. "Hi." He stood up immediately. "I can leave." Rachel's eyes snapped to me. "What is he doing here?" The question wasn't curious. It was protective and a little judgmental. "He needed help," I said carefully. "With what?" she asked. "Breaking your heart again?" "He's sick," I replied. She crossed her arms. "You don't owe him anything." "I know," I said, "but that doesn't mean I do nothing." After she left, the apartment felt smaller. I didn't mean to cause trouble. He said quietly. "You didn't," I replied. "This was always going to be complicated." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling again. But this time the questions were sharper. Was I being kind or reckless? Was I helping him or slowly undoing myself? The following week, things escalated. I got a call from HR. "Just checking in," the representative said cheerfully. "We've noticed a few changes in your availability lately." Changes. That was a polite word for slipping. "I'm dealing with a personal situation," I said. "Of course," she replied. "Just remember, we need consistency." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the disability appeal forms like they were written in another language. "What's wrong?" he asked. "My job," I said honestly. "I can't afford to lose it." He nodded slowly. "Then I should go." The words landed like a punch. "I didn't say that," I replied. "You didn't have to," he said. "I can see the math." I sat down across from him. "I need balance, not abandonment." He swallowed. "I never wanted to be the reason you struggle." "You're not," I said. "You're the reason I'm being tested." He gave a weak smile. "You always did grow during the hardest times." I hated that he knew that about me. 2 days later, I came home to find the apartment empty. His backpack was gone. So was the letter he'd written me. Panic surged through my chest. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. I checked the shelters we'd looked up. Nothing. By midnight, I was walking the streets I swore I'd never walk again, my heart pounding every time I saw someone sleeping under a blanket. I finally found him sitting on a bus stop bench, shoulders hunched, face hollow. "I couldn't stay," he said before I could speak. "You were paying too much." I sat down beside him, tears streaming freely now. "You don't get to decide that alone." "I already took too much from you," he said. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something painful and important. Helping him wasn't just about money or space or time. It was about control. He was still trying to protect me by disappearing, and I was still trying to save him without asking what he actually needed. "We need rules," I said finally. "Boundaries." He nodded. "I can agree to that. Help doesn't mean sacrifice," I continued. It means structure. He let out a long breath, like someone finally put words to what he'd been afraid of. That night, we walked back together, not as husband and wife, not as savior and burden, but as two people trying to do the right thing without losing themselves. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming, because when you reopen a door the past once slammed shut, it doesn't just let people back in, it lets the truth out. The emergency didn't come with sirens at first. It came quietly, the way real disasters often do. I woke up to the sound of something hitting the floor, soft but wrong. My heart jumped before my mind could catch up. I sat up in bed, listening. Silence. Then a strained breath. Another thud. I was on my feet instantly. He was in the bathroom doorway, half slumped against the wall, one hand clawing at the sink, the other trembling so violently it looked like it didn't belong to him. His face was pale, slick with sweat, his jaw clenched like he was trying to bite through the pain. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, I'm here." "I'm fine," he lied automatically. His knees buckled. I caught him just in time. His weight heavier than I expected. His body rigid and uncooperative. We slid down to the floor together, my back hitting the wall, his head resting awkwardly against my shoulder. "No, you're not," I said, my hands shaking now. "Talk to me. What's happening?" "I missed too many doses," he whispered. "Couldn't refill. Thought I could push through." Panic flooded my chest. "How long?" I demanded. 3 days, he said. "Maybe 4. "Oh my God," I breathed. His body jerked suddenly, muscles tightening, his breath hitching. For one terrifying second, I thought he was having a seizure. I grabbed my phone. "Don't," he said weakly, fingers tightening around my sleeve. "Please don't call." "I'm calling," I said. "You don't get to negotiate this." Fear flashed across his face, not of pain, but of consequences. "They'll ask questions," he said. "Bills, insurance. I can't. I don't care," I snapped, tears spilling down my face. "I will deal with everything else later. Stay with me." I dialed 911 with trembling hands. As I spoke to the operator, his head lolled against my shoulder. I wrapped my arms around him, grounding him, whispering his name over and over like a lifeline. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I didn't want to be another problem." "You're not a problem," I said fiercely. "You're a person having a medical emergency." The paramedics arrived quickly. Too quickly and not fast enough, all at once. They filled my apartment with efficiency and calm, voices low, movements practiced. "What medications are you on?" one asked. He tried to answer, but his words tangled. "I know," I said. "I've got the list." That realization hit me hard. I know his medications. At the hospital, time became strange, measured in forms, plastic chairs, and the steady beep of machines. I sat in the ER waiting room, with my coat wrapped around me, hands clasped so tightly my fingers went numb. I hadn't called anyone, not Rachel, not my coworkers, no one. This was happening in a bubble that felt suspended outside my real life. When the doctor finally came out, I stood so fast my chair tipped over. "He's stable," she said. But this was serious. Abruptly stopping Parkinson's medication can cause severe complications. I nodded, swallowing hard. "Will he be okay?" "He needs consistency," she said gently. "And support." The word echoed. Support. I was allowed back to see him an hour later. He looked smaller in the hospital bed. Wires taped to his chest, an IV in his arm. His eyes filled when he saw me. "You stayed," he said quietly. "Of course I stayed," I replied, though my voice cracked. He looked away. "I didn't want you to see this." "I needed to," I said, "because pretending it isn't real doesn't protect either of us." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm scared." It was the first time I'd ever heard him say those words. "I'm scared too," I admitted, "but we can't keep doing this halfway." He nodded slowly. The hospital social worker came in later that night. She talked about emergency Medicaid, patient assistance programs, long-term planning. She spoke kindly, but each word felt like another brick added to a wall I hadn't realized we were standing in front of. When she left, he looked at me with a seriousness that made my chest tighten. "You shouldn't be the one doing this," he said. "I'm the one here," I replied. "That counts for something." "But at what cost?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, because I finally understood the question. This wasn't just about helping him survive. It was about whether I was willing to let this reshape my future. Because loving someone with a chronic illness, even as an ex, meant unpredictability, sacrifice, letting go of the clean, controlled life I'd worked so hard to build. And walking away now would be easier than admitting I still cared. "I can't promise you forever," I said honestly, "but I can promise you honesty." He nodded, eyes wet. "That's more than I ever gave you." When I left the hospital at dawn, the sky was pale pink, the city just waking up. I sat in my car and cried until my chest hurt, not just for him, but for the version of us that never had a chance because fear got there first. I knew one thing for sure. After that night, nothing could go back to the way it was. Because when you see someone at their most vulnerable, you either turn away forever or you step forward knowing there's no undo button. And I still hadn't decided which one I was going to choose. The hospital discharge felt surreal. I followed the nurse's instructions, carrying a small duffel bag filled with medications, paperwork, and a few personal items that didn't seem like enough to sustain a lifetime. He walked beside me slowly, one hand in mine, like a child learning to trust again. Outside, a morning sun burned through the winter haze, lighting up the streets of Chicago with that cold clarity that forces you to see everything as it is. We stopped at the curb, and I realized something. He had nowhere to go. Not really. The shelters were full. Friends were distant. And yet here we were, standing in the middle of the city like it was our stage, waiting for the world to tell us what to do next. "I can't go back there," he said, his voice tight, almost breaking. "I can't pretend I can survive on the streets again." I nodded. I knew. I'd seen the toll it took, how fear, shame, and cold can grind a person down until they're no longer recognizable to themselves. "You can stay with me," I said. My own heart jumped at the words, because they were more than just practical. They were a declaration, a risk, a test of whether I was brave enough to hold space for him, even as it might destroy my carefully built boundaries. He looked at me, hope and disbelief warring in his eyes. "I don't want to ruin your life," he said. "You're not going to," I replied, "but I need to know something first. Why did you never tell me the truth before? About the diagnosis, about everything." He swallowed. "Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd leave faster. Afraid you'd see me as broken. And maybe I was ashamed. Ashamed that the man I promised to protect you from anything couldn't even protect himself." I felt my throat tighten. I'd never fully understood how much fear had driven him before, how much it had made him push me away, make choices that felt cruel at the time but were really acts of desperation. "You were surviving," I said softly. "You didn't know how to ask for help, and maybe you thought I wouldn't understand. But I do. I understand more than you think." He let out a shaky breath and looked down. "Then why are you still here?" "Because I care," I said. Simple, honest, and terrifying to admit. We walked to my apartment together, carrying his duffel bag, stepping carefully around puddles and broken pieces of the city's concrete. Every step felt heavy with unspoken words, apologies, and regrets. I kept thinking about all the nights I'd cried over his absence, the fights, the misunderstandings, the pride that had kept both of us from telling the truth sooner. Once inside, I showed him to the spare room. It was small but warm. I had cleared a shelf in the closet for him and made the bed. He looked around like he didn't believe this could really be happening. "This is temporary," I reminded him gently. We figure out the next steps tomorrow. One thing at a time. He nodded. I can't ask for more than that. I hope you can, I said. Because you'll get it, whether you ask or not. But you have to promise me something. What? Honesty. No hiding symptoms, no missed doses, no pretending you're fine when you're not. He looked at me, vulnerability in his eyes that I hadn't seen since the day I first knew him. I promise. That night, we ate takeout in silence. No small talk, no awkwardness, just a quiet acknowledgement that the world outside the apartment kept moving, but inside we were suspended in a moment where the past, present, and future collided. When it was time for bed, he looked at me with the faintest trace of his old self, a glimpse of the man I fell in love with before life tore him down. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For not leaving me out there. For seeing me. I swallowed hard. You're welcome. But you have to understand, this isn't a gift. It's a responsibility we share now. You and me. He nodded again. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I saw a spark of hope. But hope is fragile. The next morning would bring choices that none of us could have predicted. Confrontations with the people I had hidden this from. Financial challenges. And a truth that would force me to face the possibility that helping him might come at the cost of everything I had built for myself. Yet standing there, in the quiet glow of my apartment, I knew one thing. I could walk away again, or I could stay, and face whatever consequences came with being the person who refused to abandon someone, even after heartbreak, even after betrayal, even after years of silence. And this time, I wasn't going to walk away. The first knock on my door wasn't unexpected. It was inevitable. It was Rachel. I opened the door to her familiar, skeptical gaze. She stepped in without waiting for an invitation, scanning the apartment like a detective assessing a crime scene. Why is he here? She demanded, eyes flicking toward my ex-husband, who was sitting quietly on the couch, hoodie pulled over his head, hands clasped in his lap. I told you he needed help, I said calmly, though my chest was tight. Help? She scoffed. You're letting him move back in after everything he put you through? I felt a pang of guilt, a flicker of anger. Rachel, this isn't about revenge or the past. It's about right now. He's sick, he's struggling, and he has nowhere else to go. She shook her head. You don't get to fix everyone you know. Not if it costs you your life. I can handle it, I said firmly, and I'm not doing this alone. Her eyes softened slightly, but the judgment lingered. Just be careful. Some things aren't worth saving. I closed the door behind her, feeling the weight of her words. She wasn't wrong about everything. This situation was messy, unpredictable, and exhausting. But the idea of turning my back on him felt impossible. Later that day, the real-world consequences hit. Bills, insurance forms, and doctor's appointments flooded my inbox. I found myself juggling my job responsibilities while making calls to clinics, researching financial assistance programs, and helping him fill out applications for medication coverage. Every email I sent, every form I completed, made me feel like I was walking a tightrope. One misstep, and everything I'd worked for could collapse. And yet, even in the chaos, there were moments of clarity. When he smiled for the first time in months, I remembered the man I fell in love with. When he laughed softly at something mundane, like the way I insisted on over-seasoning spaghetti, I remembered why I stayed. But the outside world wasn't done testing us. His ex-boss called. The tone was cautious, almost condescending. I heard about your situation, he said, and while I sympathize, we have policies in place. You'll need to submit documentation for anything further. Then came the subtle judgment from neighbors, the whispered conversations overheard in the laundry room, the occasional stare in the grocery store. I realized quickly, society has little patience for people who fall apart, even less for those who try to help them. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, I felt the weight of all these expectations pressing down. "I didn't know it would be this hard," he said quietly, tracing the rim of his coffee mug. "I didn't either," I admitted. "But hardship isn't a reason to abandon someone. Not anymore." He looked at me, eyes shining with gratitude and something more. An unspoken question about whether I would really stay. "I've made mistakes," he said, "and I've caused you pain. But staying here, it feels like maybe I can make it right, or at least try." I nodded. "We'll figure it out, together." But even as I said it, a knot tightened in my stomach. Helping him wasn't just about compassion anymore. It was about confronting my own boundaries, my capacity for patience, and the fragility of the life I had painstakingly built. And I realized something crucial. Love, real human love, is never tidy. It doesn't wait for convenient moments. It doesn't respect schedules. It doesn't allow us to hide behind pride or fear. It simply demands that we show up. And so every day became a test of endurance. One day, a clinic called. They could see him on short notice, but only if we could get transportation. I rearranged my schedule, driving him across the city, navigating streets I barely recognized at night, arguing gently with him about medication adherence. Another day, we went through old paperwork together, uncovering debts and financial holes he'd kept hidden from everyone. He winced at every reminder of how far he'd fallen, and I tried to balance encouragement with reality. Meanwhile, friends and colleagues began noticing the changes in me. Subtle looks, half-spoken questions, and an unmistakable sense of concern. I felt torn. Part of me wanted to shout the truth, to declare that I was doing this because it was the right thing. But another part of me feared judgment. Yet the hardest moment came unexpectedly. I received a call from his estranged brother, someone who had stopped answering messages years ago. The voice on the other end was cautious, almost resentful. "We heard about him," the brother said. "Is he okay? Is he safe?" I swallowed hard. "He's alive," I said, "and I'm trying to help him. That's all I can do." There was a long pause. Then, quietly, the brother said, I don't know if I can forgive him. But I suppose you deserve the chance." I hung up, tears welling up. I realized then that helping him wasn't just about me or him. It was about all the broken connections, the misunderstandings, the missed opportunities for compassion that had led him here. And it dawned on me, I couldn't just shield him from the world. I had to prepare him to face it too. As night fell, we sat together, the city lights twinkling beyond the window. He looked at me, vulnerability and trust shining through. "Thank you," he said, "for not turning away." "I'm not done yet," I replied, "and neither are you." We both knew the road ahead was uncertain. The challenges, the judgment, the fear of relapse, it was all still there. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were facing it together. Because sometimes the world pushes back to test whether your compassion is real, whether your love is resilient. And sometimes, passing that test means risking everything you thought you had safely tucked. The days that followed were some of the hardest I've ever faced. Every morning began with a routine that felt almost ritualistic. Checking medications, reviewing forms, arranging appointments, and making sure he ate something substantial. Every evening ended with discussions about what had to be done next, navigating the fine line between care and independence. But amid the exhaustion, there were moments of profound clarity, moments that reminded me why I had chosen to stay. One afternoon, as we sat together filling out paperwork for long-term disability assistance, he looked at me with a seriousness that made my chest tighten. "I've been hiding more than you know," he admitted. "Financial mistakes, missed payments, things I never wanted anyone to see. I took a deep breath. We'll face them, together. You're not alone anymore. He let out a shaky laugh. I used to think that saying those words meant weakness. Now, I see its strength. The shift in him was palpable. Each day, he regained a little of the dignity and confidence that had been eroded by fear, illness, and circumstance. Then came the moment I had been dreading and anticipating at the same time. His family contacted him. His brother, who had once been unreachable, arrived at the apartment cautiously. The reunion was awkward, filled with half smiles and long pauses. But as they sat together, talking quietly, I saw something I hadn't expected. Forgiveness. Not complete, not instant, but the beginning of it. "You've been through hell," I whispered to him later, after his brother had left. "I have," he admitted, "and I couldn't have faced it alone. You gave me the chance to be human again." I felt a lump in my throat. The man before me, once my husband, now a survivor, was no longer just a ghost of the past. He was here, present, flawed, and real. I realized then that the journey we had taken together wasn't just about helping him survive. It was about discovering the depths of my own courage, compassion, and resilience. It was about understanding that forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it transforms it. One evening, weeks later, we walked through the park near my apartment. The winter had passed, leaving bare trees and crisp air. He looked at me, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You stayed," he said softly, "even when it was hard." "I stayed," I said, smiling back, "because some things are worth the risk." He took my hand in his, a gesture simple yet profound. "And I'm going to keep trying," he said. "Trying to make it right, to rebuild, to live." I nodded, understanding that life doesn't come with guarantees. It comes with choices. And sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most profound rewards. That night, as I closed the door to my apartment and watched him rest in the room I had cleared for him, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The past was still there, painful, raw, but it no longer controlled us. We had faced the darkest moments together. We had confronted fear, illness, and judgment. And we had chosen compassion over resentment, honesty over pride, and hope over despair. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But now we face them together, not as exes, not as victims of circumstance, but as two human beings who had survived, learned, and grown. And for the first time in a long time, I knew something undeniable. Sometimes the people we once lost aren't gone forever. Sometimes they return, broken but real, and give us the chance to rewrite the ending. We had survived the streets, the hospitals, the judgment of others, and the weight of our own past mistakes. And in that survival, we found something greater than forgiveness or redemption. We found a new beginning. A beginning that neither of us could have imagined, but one we would face together. And as the city lights shimmered outside my window, I realized that some truths, no matter how painful, deserve to be seen. And some love, no matter how complicated, deserves to be given. Because sometimes, the act of staying is the bravest thing we can do. And sometimes, it changes everything.